All right, what's up guys? Back in the shop. It's a few weeks after Gingerman. Let me turn off the music. Yeah, bummer. Thought I won the event, got the trophy. Following day, Grid Life realized they messed up because they forgot to calculate the qualifying points, which I thought I won by 1 point, but after the qualifying points were added to Matan, I ended up losing by 1 point. So second overall for the weekend, not bad. The good news is it doesn't change anything about the season championship. The season championship is only about, I think it's best 16 races throughout the season, plus the last 4 races of the final event. So all I gotta do is just, get good finishes, and that's exactly what I did at Gingerman. I got 2 seconds, a third? Yeah, 2 seconds, a third, and a win. So good points for the season. So anyway, we're back in the shop. It's the weekend before Mid-Ohio, and I'm just giving the whole car a once-over. And one more thing is the brakes. So let me talk about the brakes here for a little bit. The number one comments I get in my video is, why do I tap the brakes so much on straightaways? A lot of people don't seem to really understand what I'm doing. Basically, when you're on a racetrack and you're doing a lot of cornering, G-forces, you're driving over rumble strips, there's a little bit of flex in the hub, and that kind of causes the rotor to flex as well a little bit inside the caliper. The flex of the rotor can push the pistons in a little bit, and the same thing with rumble strips. Rumble strips will vibrate the piston kind of back into the caliper. So what that means is when you come into the next brake zone, you now have a gap between the piston and the rotor, so it makes the pedal feel extremely soft. So what I like to do on straightaways, and it's kind of more of a habit lately, is I like to pump the pedal just a little bit just to make sure the pistons are right up against the rotor. So when I go to the brake in the brake zone, I have a nice, strong, confident pedal feel. 2 things that I've kind of noticed lately this season, which I probably didn't really think about it much during the races, is I'm doing it a lot more than I normally do. And you guys called it all out. Something's going on with the braking system that is introducing a soft pedal. I haven't really been able to figure it out, but yeah, I just wanna, basically show you my brake setup. So this is a fast brakes kit. It's an STR 43 caliper, so it's a big guy. And I think it's a 330 mil rotor. I believe it's like 1.1 inches thick. It's a really good setup, and we have obviously Hawk ER1 pads, which is fantastic. This kit, it's pretty awesome. So that's the front. The rear is just a complete OEM Integra Type R kit. So Integra Type R caliper, ITR rotor. I'm using a 4x100 knuckle with an Integra Type R hub, and then I'm using the honed slim nut in the back. So pretty big caliper up front. I believe the pistons, it's a 4-piston made for a Honda application, because the size of the piston is pretty crucial to pedal feel. And they are 38 mil and 42 mil. So it's a staggered piston setup because you want the leading piston to be smaller than the trailing piston. And then one last thing, I guess, regarding my brake system is I run a pedal box setup. So I run a full tilt-in 850 underfoot pedal box assembly. So it's a dual master on the brake. So I have a master that is dedicated to just the front circuit, and then I have a master that's dedicated to the rear circuit. So it's a really good setup, and I need to use this because I sit so far back. But it's really cool because you can fine tune how much pressure you want on the front, how much pressure you want on the rear. And then of course it's a third master for the clutch. Another cool feature with the pedal box is you can adjust the bias front to rear using this knob right here. So when you spin this cable, if you follow it, it goes to the bias bar. It's gonna rotate, so it's gonna change where both masters are kind of centered on that pedal. So the closer the master is to the center of the pedal, the more force you're gonna apply to that master versus the other one. And this actually caused an issue at Road America last year where I moved the bias bar so far forward that it seized up against the pedal assembly and it caused the brake to basically just stay on. And I basically burned the entire front brake system of the car. I had, let me show you how hot the front brake system got. This is a relatively new StopTech STR43 caliper. This is what it looks like when it gets really hot. As you can see, she got burnt pretty badly. So after that incident last year, I bought a new pair of calipers, replaced all the brake lines, replaced the seals, rebled the whole system. So that was a whole situation that was kind of just last year. But anyway, the caliper I just showed you from Road America, I had these things in there. These are knockback springs. So these springs go behind each piston. You have 4 of them per caliper. And basically what these springs are designed to do is they just put a little bit of force on the piston to keep it against the rotor. Not enough force to cause any kind of braking force. It's just enough to keep the pressure within the piston so the piston doesn't slide back into the caliper. So those springs actually help firm up the pedal a decent amount. So what I just ended up doing right now is I took all the springs out of the burned up calipers, and I'm about ready to disassemble the calipers that are currently on the car. Another thing that I just noticed, I seem to have some kind of rotor rubbing against this caliper. That right there is a rotor grinding against the side of the caliper. You don't see that anywhere else, as you can see. And then you can also see there's a huge burr, and then the metal shim is also grinding away. So that means maybe my caliper is not perfectly centered on the rotor. And that could be a big reason why I'm getting a soft pedal, is because the rotor might be so close to the caliper that it's rubbing against it, which is also not good for your brakes, right? You don't want your rotor rubbing against your caliper. That's slowing you down. Like if you're heavily loaded in the G corner, which is what I think is happening. And then also because of this burr, the pad itself is not going to slide freely. It's a bad example. It's not going to slide freely that way. So just an example of, you know, taking apart the car after an event just to like clean things and inspect them can hide a lot of issues and like hidden stuff that you would never find just with a normal inspection. So that's one thing that could be causing an issue. I'm going to investigate that, make sure the caliper's centered up. I'm going to install my knockback springs and then move on throughout the rest of the cars. Long explanation on brakes, but I just kind of wanted to answer a lot of the questions as to why I tap the brakes so much. So hopefully with these fixes, I won't have to do this as much as Mid-Ohio. So ideally, I go through a corner, go down the back straight, get on the brake, and it's nice and firm and there's no play in it. That would be the ideal scenario. So we'll see how the pedal feels at Mid-Ohio. But anyway, I'm gonna get to installing these and then move on. little bit of compressed air, and that's one of them out. All right, so piston out, seals honestly look pretty good. Clean up the piston, don't want any kind of debris on it. It's looking pretty good, honestly. And then now, time for the spring, and these are pretty cool. They literally just snap on the back of the piston like that. So that's it, that's all it's doing. And this is, honestly, I think this is just like a 2 or 4 pound spring, but you can see how when it compresses, it kind of compresses into the piston. So pretty cool setup. Now all you gotta do, just pop her back in. Once again, make sure there's no debris in here. Line her up, boom. So yeah, you see all that, those little black spots, you know, you really want to make sure you clean all of that. It's just brake dust and other dirt and grime. And normally I would probably replace these seals. Honestly, if I had them, I would have replaced them, but this is still a relatively fresh caliper, so I think it's fine. But next time maybe next season or the off season, I'll probably replace these seals. So you know the deal. It's very satisfying. They just kind of snap on.
And the mic on my GoPro is bugging out, so let's just do a voiceover. That's the giant burr that was caused by the rotor dragging against the caliper, mainly because the caliper probably wasn't centered and there's a little bit of flex in the hub. It also caused a pretty big burr on the pad guide. So I gotta clean both of those things up to make sure the pads are free. And then here's just an example of the knockback springs in action. Just a little bit of force on the piston just to keep them nice and tight against the pad and rotor.
All right, let me turn off this compressor real quick. So, dealing with the next issue. Caliper's done, got it on the floor, ready to go on. But let's talk about the 265 tire situation, because the inside edge of it was, it started basically delaminating, which I haven't seen that on a Kumo yet. So it leads me to believe that maybe the wider tire, because I normally run 255s. So I'm thinking maybe the wider tire was rubbing the inside here. Now, there's also another thing that I noticed was I normally have steering rack stoppers in my steering rack. So this is an example, this is a 3D printed part. And the way these work is you basically just put them here, like so, and then it basically limits the amount of lock to lock you have. So you don't intentionally bury your tire into the wheel well. Now, this is a fresh part. This is what was in there before in a million pieces. So obviously after about 2 seasons worth, this 3D printed steering rack stopper disintegrated, cracked, probably broke, and then yeah, I had basically nothing. I mean, there's pieces everywhere. I've been digging it out of the steering rack. So without this, basically I could tell I was able to turn the wheel more on one side versus the other. So maybe what I'm thinking is the tire was rubbing against this part and maybe it got cut. And then on track, the tire ended up delaminating. Luckily, I got a fresh set of steering rack stoppers, so I'm going to probably shave these down a little bit because I don't need them to be this big. This is how much I originally planned on limiting the rack both sides, so one of these on both sides. But I'm gonna cut maybe like a 1/4 inch off, and then yeah, you basically just pop this on here, and then you put your screw your tie rod in, and then bam. That's how you limit how much you want to be able to turn the wheel. Anyway, that's a good discovery. It's kind of what I was thinking was going on in my head. Whether or not that was the reason why the tire was delaminating on the inner edge, I don't really know. But yeah, I'm at least happy that I got all the junk out of because it was all up in this boot and it was kind of sitting on the rack. So happy that I got all that out of there at least. I'm gonna check the other side and then yeah, install these. All right, so put it all back together. I think I figured out why the rotor was rubbing against the caliper. and I think it was because of the aluminum caliper brackets. So now I reinstalled it, and you can see the rotor nice and centered. I had to use kind of washers to space the caliper bracket out. But what I was saying, I think one of the reasons why the rotor was rubbing was because I think the threads on the aluminum bracket started to get pretty weak, because I was putting this back together, and the torque spec for it's like an M12 by 1.75 bolt. I torque it to about 70 foot-pounds, and the bolt just kept turning and turning, and of course the threads went. So I think the threads and getting the bolts off was actually pretty easy too, so they definitely lost torque. So I think the bracket was just kind of a little loose, not fully torqued down. So what I actually ended up doing, I should have recorded this, but let's see if I can see it. I actually made this a through hole. So normally you put the bolt in this way and you thread into this aluminum bracket, but you know, steel bolt into aluminum, you know, what's gonna win? The steel bolt. And over time, you know, there's a lot of forces going on with this bracket, right? So I was gonna basically tap it and do like a heel coil set, but I was like, well shit, I have such a big rotor that the bolt head can stick past the bracket and go within the rotor and not be an issue. So that's basically what I did, and if Roy ever watches this video, he's gonna love this, because he was telling me how much he loves just like drilling threads out and just doing a bolt and nut. But in this case, that seems to be the best solution. So basically I went bolt from this backside forward, nice little locking nut. It does clear these bolts here. There's no clearance issues. And yeah, it's just overall a much beefier setup. You can even see, the bolts right there, maybe. There we go. So yeah, that clears, that's solved. The caliper is centered. So I think in general, that's gonna be a big improvement on the front. Mainly one, because you never want your rotor rubbing against your caliper. It's just unnecessary heat, it's extra drag. And I think the through bolts situation is gonna make that whole caliper bracket way stiffer. It's not gonna flex as much. So all in all, oh, and I also did the knockback springs. So all of those things, all those corrections and fixes should really firm up the pedal. So I'm really excited to see how it feels at Mid-Ohio. So that's done. I took the whole suspension apart, just inspected everything. Everything looks good besides the caliper bracket. I did put my steering rack stopper into the rack on that side. So now, basically I have about 80% to a full turn both ways. Yep, almost a full turn both ways. And once again, that's just to prevent my extremely wide front wheels. They're 18 by 10.5, 265s on an EG Civic, very wide. So just limiting the steering rack prevents the tire from basically rubbing here and rubbing there, which, you know, could cause a cut tire situation. So yeah, that's front of the car mostly complete. Oh, actually, let me show you one thing. Here's the reason why I always love to nut and bolt everything after every event. You know, I take car prep very seriously, and at the end of the day, it's your own safety, right? You don't want to miss things, like especially like on the front brakes. If those caliper nuts have gotten loose or stripped out, and you lose a caliper, that's it, man, you're done. But check this out. This is why I nut and bolt everything. You know, I like to shake everything, make sure everything is tight. A little bit of play in these bearings. It's kind of a given. They're cheap commercial bearings, but here. That is a completely loose sway bar. It's not good. That's bad. So just tighten that up. That should be good. Gotta swap rear pads. They're pretty low. Hawk ER1s last pretty much a full season on the rear of this car. But yeah, I used these all last year. So we're gonna swap those out. Got some new fresh pads. Rotors honestly look pretty good. Not too worried about that. And then I think that's pretty much it regarding like suspension and brakes and stuff. Then I'll have to do an alignment because I had to take one of the tie rods out. But yeah, busy day, man. Saturday, 8:13 p.m. so far. I haven't touched the car since today. It's been rough. Been working a lot, unfortunately, and I just haven't had time to work on the car at all. Last weekend I worked Saturday and Sunday. Shit, I think on Wednesday I worked until like 9 p.m. and just car's been neglected, but we're gonna get it all done today. Well, there she is. Damn. Got some fresh TSW Kenmoras in there. I guess magnesium blue. They look really cool. In the sunlight, they kind of pop, but in the dark, they almost look black. So I was a little 50-50, you know, with the blue and the green, but man, it's a vibe. I'm digging it. The white ones that I had, I basically scuffed the blue down, which hurt a lot. So I scuffed them down and I rattle canned them white, and unfortunately, they did not survive. I mean, the rears weren't that bad, but the fronts, yeah, they did not survive. This brake dust, you know, a lot of people were telling me, oh, use Iron X remover or use this or use that, but no, that rattle can white did not last, and I don't think anything was going to get that brake dust off. Some other stuff I did, I got new fresh 265 front tires, not shaved this time. I did some ducting for the oil cooler, so all the air going in through here should go directly through the oil cooler. And yeah, that's it basically. Nothing really performance-wise. Did the setup, pretty much similar to Gingerman. I think the car felt really good at Gingerman, so we're gonna run with it again for Mid-Ohio, see what it does. And yeah, I think that's it. So Mid-Ohio, about to head up here soon. All I gotta really do is load up the car. Got the trailer all ready to go, organized. So yeah, load up the car, load up the toolbox, and ready to go.